Today, let's talk about the conservation of momentum. Have you heard the word momentum? Momentum is a commonly used term in sports. A team that has the momentum is on the move and is going to take some effort to stop. Momentum is a physics term and it refers to the quantity of motion that an object has. If an object is in motion or on the move, then it has momentum. So we can say that momentum is inertia in motion. So when we say inertia, it has something to do with mass, right? So once that mass is in motion, then it has momentum. Then, momentum is also defined as the product of mass, okay, of an object in its velocity. So you need those two quantities for you to get the momentum of an object. You need the mass. You need the mass of a certain object and the velocity of that object. Okay? So once you multiply the mass and the velocity of a certain object, then you'll get momentum. And depends on the quantity of mass and velocity. So momentum rely on the mass of an object and the velocity of the object. And momentum is a vector quantity. So when you say vector quantity, it has magnitude and direction. Okay, so that is momentum. Let's apply the concept of momentum. Observe the motion or the movement of these two vehicles and observe their mass. Which among the two vehicles is easier for you to stop? So I know that you will answer the one or the smaller one, right? Or the blue car. And this idea suggests that heavier or more massive objects have greater momentum than lighter object because of its mass. Okay, remember that the one that affects momentum of an object is the mass, right? And once the mass of an object is greater, then the momentum is also greater. Now, how about this scenario? We have two identical cars moving, the black and white car, right? And the black one is a bit ahead, okay, from the white car. But the scooter, if you will notice, has more momentum because it is more faster than the other two vehicles. So among the three vehicles that you have observed, the scooter has greater momentum because it has more velocity than the other two vehicles. Again, velocity affects momentum. Once the velocity increases, momentum also increases. Okay, so we can define momentum in equation, which is P is equal to M times V, where P is the symbol for momentum, M is for mass, and the unit used for mass is kilogram, and then V is for velocity, and the unit used for velocity is meter per second. So remember that unit ha, please bear in mind that we use kilogram for mass and meter per second in velocity. Now, why is that P is the symbol for momentum? Bakit hindi M? No? Why is the symbol for momentum we use the letter P, not letter M? It is because letter M is already taken by the quantity mass, diba? So kung ginamit pa natin yung M, hindi dalawang M na yan, magkakalituhan lang tayo, no? So history says that Isaac Newton used the word impetus, okay, in his book Principia to refer the tendency of the moving object to continue on its path without the application of force. So impetus originates from the Latin word patere, okay, that means a Latin word which means to seek. Hence, the letter P is used to represent momentum. So, dun po nang galing yung word na or yung letter na P.
Let's have some sample problems about momentum. So problem number 1, what is the momentum of a 2 kilogram bowling ball rolling at 2 meter per second? So, sundin natin yung way kung paano mag-solve ng problem. First is for you to get the given. So, we have here 2 kilogram and we have the 2 meter per second. So, kilogram is for mass, right? So, we have mass is equal to 2 kilogram. And then, 2 meter per second. Meter per second is for velocity. So, V is equal to 2 meter per second. Now, what is unknown? Anong hinahanap sa problem na ito? What is momentum? Diba? Hinahanap natin sa momentum. So, P or momentum is missing. What is the equation used for momentum? So, we have P is equal to M times V. Okay? Let's substitute. P is equal to 2 kilogram times 2 meter per second. Okay, so just multiply 2 times 2, of course. We have 4. What is the unit used for momentum? Wala tayong pwedeng i-cancel dyan eh, diba? So, ikakopy natin yung both unit nila. So, unit is kilogram meter per second. Final answer, we have 4 kilogram that meter per second. This is now the final answer for number 1. Again na, walang ika-cancel dyan na. So, may dot, it symbolizes na multiplication yung ginamit natin sa operation dito sa sa formula na ito. Okay, next is number 2. What is the velocity of a 0.7 kilogram ball that has a momentum of 1.4 kilogram meter per second? So, our given is we have 7 kilogram ball, that is the mass of the ball, or 0.7 kilogram. Then we have the momentum, which is 1.4 kilogram that meter per second. What is being asked or unknown in this problem? Velocity. So, wala siyang velocity. So, anong gagamitin nating equation dyan? The equation used for momentum is P is equal to M times velocity, right? So, since we have 3 quantities, pwede nating i-apply dito yung triangle method. Okay? So, susundin lang natin yung placement nung mga quantities na nandyan. So, since magkatabi silang dalawa, right? Diba? Magkatabi silang dalawa. Dito natin sila ilalagay sa baba. M, N, B, N, P. Diba? P sa taas. So, paano natin malalaman kung tama yung ginawa nating placement? Kasi, pag nawawala yung P, takpan mo lang siya. Diba? P is equal to M times velocity. Pag magkatabi sila, multiplication lang yung gagamitin mo operation. Pag nawawala yung M, takpan mo si M, then you have P divided by V. Okay? Kasi nasa taas si P at nasa baba si velocity. So, we will use division. At pag nawawala si velocity, okay, takpan si velocity. So, we have P is equal to, or V is equal to P divided by M. Okay? So, sana na-gets yun. V is equal to, ayan, tinakpan ko kasi siya yung nawawala. P over M. So, yan yung gagamitin natin formula for velocity. So, substitute natin, V is equal to, yung P natin is, or our momentum is 1.4 kilogram that meter per second divided by yung M natin, which is 0.7 kilogram. So, calculator, 1.4 divided by 0.7. So, we have 2. So, final answer is 2. Anong gagamitin natin unit for velocity? So, we have here kilogram and kilogram. Natira ay meter per second. So, the velocity is equal to 2 meter per second. This is now your final answer. Okay, so madali lang, no?
Change in momentum, okay, it means you can increase or decrease the momentum, right? So, to increase the momentum of an object, apply the greatest force for as long as possible. Okay? Take note of the underlined word. So, we have the force. Okay? So, we have the force. And then, for as long as possible, which means how long, no? Kung gaano siya katagal mong in-apply yung force. So, we are measuring time. And then, when you extend the time of impact, you reduce the force applied to it. Okay, if you want to decrease the momentum of an object, you have to extend the time, okay, of the impact, and you reduce the force applied to it. Again, take note of the underlined word. So we have the time and the force. We have the force and the time. Okay, so in here you have two quantities. We have the force and the time. Okay, a change in momentum is affected by two quantities. So we have the time and the force. And the two quantities here, if you get the product of these two quantities, then you will have impulse. Okay? Impulse is another quantity in physics defined as the product of force and the time interval over which the forces acts. So impulse, you just need the force of or the force applied to an object and the time or how long that force is being applied on that object. So you just need the two quantities and then you have impact. In equation, impulse or I is equal to F times T or force multiplied to time. I is the symbol for impulse, F for force, and the unit used for force is N or Newton. Okay? Newton can be written as kilogram dot meter per second squared. Okay? So, yan yung parang longer version ng Newton. Or just write N. And time, or T, we will use the unit S. Now, what is the unit used for impulse? So, since wala tayong pwedeng i-cancel dyan, the unit used for impulse is N dot S. Okay, so yun yung ginagamit nating unit sa impulse.
Okay, next is for the impulse. So, in this problem, a force of 400 Newton acts on an object for 3 seconds. What is the impulse? So, for our given, we have Newton is force. Okay? Remember that F is equal to 400 N. And we have time, which is 3 seconds. Then, unknown is impulse or I. What is the equation used for impulse? I is equal to force times time. Okay, let's substitute. I is equal to 400 Newton multiplied by 3 seconds. So, pa-calculator ba natin? Sige, calculator natin. We have 1,000 So, we have 1,200. What is the unit used? Pwede ba tayong mag-cancel dyan? So, hindi. N.S. So, I is equal to 1,200 N.S. Okay, so pwede rin natin i-apply dito yung triangle method na ginamit kanina sa momentum. Okay, tatandaan lang natin yung pwesto nila, no? Malay nyo maka-encounter nyo sa ibang problem. So, I is equal to F times time. Pag I or impulse yung nawawala, di I is equal to force times time. Pag force ang nawawala, force is equal to impulse divided by time. Pag time ang nawawala, time impulse divided by force. So, ganun lang kadali ang pagkuha ng iba't ibang quantities. Ito applicable lang kapag 3 quantities ang nasa formula mo. Pero pag more than that, ibang derivation na yung kailangan natin gawin. Okay.
Let's talk about the conservation of momentum. In an isolated system, the total momentum of the system before the collision is equal to the momentum of the system after the collision. So, ayusin natin yung definition. Isa-isahin natin siya, no? What does system means? Ano yung system dito na sinasabi na binabanggit? So, yung say system, it is a group of an object that interact and affect each other. Okay? Balikan natin. When we say conservation of momentum in an isolated system, when we say isolated, wala silang ibang kasama doon, sila lang, diba? Isolated. Okay, again, system is a group of objects that interact and affect each other. Okay, the total momentum of the system before the collision, okay, again, the total momentum of that system before the collision is equal to the momentum after the collision. Okay, wait, by the way, what is collision? So, collision is a forceful coming together in direct contact of two bodies. So, pag pinadali natin, collision means banggaan. Okay? So, again, define uli natin what does conservation of momentum means. An isolated system. Okay, in an isolated system, again, walang ibang involved, yung kung ano lang yung nandun. Okay, the total momentum is conserved. When you say conserved, walang nabawas before and after the collision. Okay, so yung sinasabi ng conservation of momentum. Conserved, walang nabawas sa kanyang momentum. Okay, before the collision and after the collision. So, ganun po yung definition natin ng law of conservation of momentum. In equation, law of conservation of momentum can be defined as the total momentum before collision is equal to the total momentum after collision. Kasi nga conserved, di ba? So, ito yung kanyang equation. We have here M1 V1 or mass of the object and then the velocity of the object or the first object plus M2 V2 is equal to M1 V1. Dapat meron tong prime prime plus M2 V2 prime. Okay? So, the symbol prime here, okay, yung prime or yung guhit na yan, symbolizes the momentum after the collision. Okay, may ganyan. So, bakit ganito kahaba yung formula? Una, collision involves two bodies, right? So, dalawang body yung nagpanggaan. So, that means kung nagkaroon ng panggaan, meron niyang involved na mass and velocity, di ba? So, we have here mass and velocity of the first body and the mass and the velocity of the second body. Kaya may ganyan siya. May subscript na 1. Tapos ito, 2. ba? And then, kukunin mo rin yung kanyang momentum after the collision naman. The mass and the velocity of the object 1 or the body 1, and then the mass and the velocity of the body 2. So, dito, pinapatunayan sa equation na to na dapat equal yung before at saka yung after the collision. So, ito, yung before collision. Okay, so before collision, and then ito naman is after collision. So, pinapakita lang dito na equal dapat sila. Okay, para ma-conserve yung momentum. Okay, where, yan na, M1, we have here the M1 is the mass of the first object or the first body. V1 is the velocity of the first object before collision. So, ito yun, before collision. And then we have the M2, mass of the second object. Okay, and the V2 is the velocity of the second object before collision. So, bakit dito hindi ini-include yung before collision dito sa mass tsaka dito? Kasi po, hindi naman nagbabago yung mass ng isang object kahit before pa yan o after collision, di ba? So, automatic na yun na hindi siya nagbabago. Constant ang mass ng isang object. Then, M1, okay, dito no sa tayo sa side na to, M1 we have the mass and the of the first object, and V1 prime, okay, yung quit is the velocity of the first object after the collision, okay, and then M2 is the mass of the second object, and then V2 is the velocity of the second object after collision. So, ganyan yung formula na ginagamit natin sa law of conservation of momentum. Now, we have three categories for collision. First one, we have the elastic collision. So, elastic collision is yung characteristic niya or yung katangian niya, body separated after the collision. So, after nilang magbanggaan, after magkaroon ng collision, usually naghihiwalay, okay, nagsiseparate yung dalawang object. And under elastic collision, momentum is conserved. Okay? Momentum is conserved, meaning equal yung before and after niya. And then the total kinetic energy is conserved. Now, why is that kinetic energy is involved in collision? Of course, kinetic energy is defined as energy in motion, right? And collision involves motion. That's why kinetic energy is, we have kinetic energy or involves si kinetic energy sa collision. So, again, dito, kagaya ng nasa GIF natin, okay, once nagkaroon sila ng collision yung dalawang object, ang katangian ng elastic collision, they separate from one another. Okay, parang ganyan. Next is we have inelastic collision. In here, the characteristic of this type of collision, bodies cling to each other, okay, after the collision and move in a common velocity. So, dito naman sa inelastic collision, once na yung dalawang object ay nagkabanggaan, they move or they cling to each other and they move in a common velocity. So, depende kung saan direction sila mapupunta. Dito sa ating GIF, sa example natin, since yung track ay greater yung kanyang mass, okay, yung velocity niya yung masusunod, diba? That's why dito papunta yung direction nila. But, kung the other car naman, yung mas greater yung mass niya, of course, papunta naman dito sa side na to yung kanilang velocity. So, yun yung katangian ng inelastic collision. Then, under this type of collision as well, momentum is conserved, which means, again, conserved, walang changes, equal lang yung kanilang momentum before and after the collision. But, the total kinetic energy is not conserved sa type of collision na to. Hindi na conserve yung kanilang kinetic energy because some of these kinetic energy is converted to heat, sound, and permanent deformation of the body. So, which means ito yung greater yung impact na naidulot ng collision, no? So, ito yung klase ng banggaan na nagkakaroon ng yupi, nagkakayupi-yupi yung kunwari, kung nasakyan man yan or kung ano man yung nabangga niya. So, this type of collision, total kinetic energy is not conserved.
So let's try to answer this problem. This one is a sample problem in your module on page 12. It says here a body of, or a 2 kilogram body moving with a velocity of 9 meter per second collides with 0.5 kilogram body at rest. Find the velocity of the new body after collision. So, nagkaroon ng collision, dalawang object or dalawang body. And first is for us to look for the given. Mga iba-ibang given na nandito sa problem nito. So, first is we have the mass of the first body. So, we have M1 is equal to 2 kilogram. And then, ang kanyang velocity ay 8 meter per second. So, V1 is equal to 8 meter per second. Collides with 0.5 kilogram body. That is the mass of the second body. So, M2 is equal to 0.5 kilogram. And it says here, the body is at rest. Ibig sabihin nun, walang movement yung second body. So, we can say that the velocity of the second body is V2 is equal to 0 meter per second. Okay? Now, what is unknown? Find the velocity of the new body after collision. So, ang nawawala ay the velocity. Velocity after collision. So, yun yung nawawala or yun yung gusto nating ma-identify. The equation used for conservation of momentum is we have M1 V1 plus M2 V2. Okay, so ito pa lang yung before. And it must be equal to M1 V1 prime plus M2 V2 prime. So ito naman yung after. Okay? So, ganyan yung gagamitin nating equation. So, let's substitute natin yung given dun sa ating formula. So, we have M1, ang mass 1 natin ay 2 kilogram, and ang kanyang velocity ay 8 meter per second. Plus, ang ating M2 ay 0.5 kilogram times ang kanyang velocity ay 0 meter per second. Okay, equal. Now, dito, sa after niya, kailangan natin ina-analyze yung problem. Kasi sabi dito, the second body is at rest. So, pag nagkaroon ng banggaan yung dalawang object, okay, once na nagkaroon ng collision yung dalawang object, at yung isa ay hindi gumagalaw, anong mangyayari dun sa may velocity, which is 8 meter per second? So, halimbawa, we have two objects here. Nagkaroon sila ng collision. Yung isa, walang movement. 0 yung kanyang velocity. At yung isa ay may 8 meter per second. So, ang mangyayari ay matatangay nung isang object, right? So, that is what type of collision? Is it inelastic or elastic collision? So, that type of collision is inelastic collision because the body cling to each other, di ba? So, magkasama sila and they have this common velocity. So, dahil under siya ng inelastic collision, ibig sabihin nun, iisa na lang yung magiging velocity nilang dalawa after ng collision. So, since iisa na lang yung kanilang magiging velocity, yung mass ng dalawang object natin ay i-combine natin kasi magkasama na silang dalawa, right? So, magiging mass 1, which is 2 kilogram, plus yung mass 2 natin, which is 0.5 kilogram, And ang hinahanap natin ay yung velocity after the collision. So, ito yung hinahanap natin. Right? So, ganyan yung magiging formula. This one is mass 1 plus mass 2 times the velocity or the the velocity or the common velocity of those two objects after the collision. So, ganito yung magiging itsura ng equation natin. Yes po, pwedeng mabago yan dito sa original depending on the ano yung kailangan dun sa problem. So, in this case, ganito yung magiging itsura niya. So, sagutan na natin. Okay? So, ito, wala na yan. Cancel na yan. Diba? 0 kasi siya. Then, we have 2 times 8. We have 16. Lapit natin dito. 16 kilogram that meter per second is equal to 2 plus 0.5. We have 2.5 kilogram and the velocity. Siya yung nawawala, diba? So, pag ganyan na, anong next na gagawin dyan pag ganyan? Is for you to divide both sides by, anong gagamitin mong divisor? Yung katabi ng missing quantity. So, ito yung missing. Ang katabi niyang number ay 2.5, right? So, siya yung gagamitin nating divisor. 2.5 kilogram. 2.5 kilogram. So, this is 1. 2.5 divided by 2.5 is 1. Equal. Copy natin yung V2. So, 16 divided by 2.5 is 6.4. So, we have 6.4. Okay, so ano yung pwede nating i-cancel na unit dyan? Yung magkapareho. We have kilogram and kilogram. So, matitira si meter per second. So, the final answer is velocity or the final velocity of the two object is 6.4 meter per second. Ayan. Diba? So, yun po yung nangyari dyan.